In today's episode, I'm going to tell you two stories which are 100% true, but only one of these stories is going to have a satisfying explanation, and the other remains a mystery. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel, and if not, you'll probably notice that this video is a little bit different from my previous videos. This is a new channel, and I'm trying to experiment with as much different variety of content as possible to see what you guys like and what you guys don't, and what works and what doesn't. And of course, I still plan to be posting full-length true crime mystery stories here as well. Also, a quick disclaimer, I am always scouring the internet looking for different cases and different stories to tell on this channel, and both of these stories today are first-hand accounts that have been sent or found on YouTube, Discord, Reddit, or other places on the internet, and all of them claim to be 100% true, but I will leave that up to you to decide if you believe them. But as always, thank you for watching another episode by Storyvault. If you're a fan of true crime, mysteries, and strange occurrences, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with a friend. And now that you've done so, let's open the vault. On a quiet summer night, a young teenage girl by the name of Catherine was alone in a large house. She was in this house because she was house sitting for her grandma, who had taken off for a few days to Florida for a short vacation with some of her friends. Catherine was not at all uncomfortable with this situation. She had in fact house sat for her grandmother on a few other occasions before, and she rather liked getting away from her family and her brother and having an entire house all to herself. It made her feel rather grown up. So on this summer evening, Catherine was just hanging around her grandmother's house, and she was just getting kind of bored being alone in the big house, so she decided she was just going to go ahead and go into the bedroom early that night. She wasn't really planning on going to sleep, but she was just going to go ahead and go into the bedroom and be on her phone watching videos and texting her friends for a while. But of course, before Catherine went to bed, she went all through the house and she locked all of the doors and made sure that all of the windows were locked. And then after she was sure that she was secure in the house, she just went over to the spare bedroom, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and just generally having a good time. And Catherine is on her phone for a few hours until about midnight, when at this point she hears a sound coming from outside of the room. It was a very faint noise, and Catherine wasn't even sure she hadn't just imagined it, so she paused the video on her phone, and then she just stopped and she listened for a while. And after a few seconds, she heard the sound again. It was very faint, but it almost sounded like somebody saying, "Hello," very, very faintly. Catherine didn't really know what to do or what to make of this, but as she sat there for a few minutes, every now and then she would hear the distinct sound of a woman's voice saying, "Hello." So Catherine climbed up out of the bed and she walked out of the spare room and she walked into the main area of the house because she was trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. So as Catherine's walking through the house, she listens and she thinks she hears the sound of the voice coming from around the front door. So Catherine goes around into the dining room because the dining room had these big windows that were positioned in such a way that if you looked out into the left, you had a clear view of the front porch. And if anybody was on the front porch, you'd be able to see them from there without actually having to walk up to the door. So when Catherine got up to the window, she peered through the blinds, which were shut, and she kind of cracked them open and she looked out and she kind of looked towards that porch, trying to see if she could see anybody, expecting that there might be a woman standing on the porch looking at her front door. And sure enough, when Catherine peered through that little crack in the blinds to look over at the front porch, she did indeed see a woman on the front porch. But she wasn't looking at the front porch. Instead, the woman was looking directly at her. So Catherine just kind of froze as she peered through that window, not really knowing what to do because now she was making eye contact with this woman who was standing on her front porch, staring at her through the blinds like she was expecting her to look through that window. So Catherine and this woman have this awkward moment where they're just staring at each other, and this woman has the strangest smile on her face, and once again she just looks at her and says, "Hello?" So Catherine was confused and unsettled by the sight of this woman just standing on the front porch saying hello. She thought for a minute that it might have been one of her grandmother's friends, but she also thought it was weird that even if it was her grandmother's friend, why would she be coming to the house at midnight? And she wasn't ringing the doorbell, she wasn't knocking on the door, she was just standing there saying hello. So Catherine shut the blinds and she backed away from the dining room window. She definitely did not want to go over to the door to let this woman in or talk to her, so she just kind of backed up and went back to that spare room. And when she did that, she couldn't hear the woman anymore. Maybe the woman had gone away, or maybe she had just stopped talking, but when she got into the room, Catherine couldn't hear the voice anymore. But she immediately pulled out her phone and she began texting her sister and all of her friends, talking about what had just happened and what a strange experience she had just had with that woman. Some of Catherine's friends told her, "You need to call the police," and Catherine's sister told her that she should probably call her grandmother to see if it might have been one of her friends after all. But Catherine didn't really want to overreact and call the police while she was over at her grandmother's house, and she knew that at midnight her grandmother in Florida was sure to already be asleep, and she didn't see any real point of calling her just to make her worried. So Catherine just stayed in the room and she didn't call anyone. She just stayed there and she continued texting her friends and hoped that maybe the woman would just go away. And Catherine sat there in the spare room for the better part of an hour, and to this point she didn't hear the woman and she didn't hear any other sounds, and she began to really think that maybe the woman had in fact just gone away. And just as Catherine is becoming almost certain that the woman had just gone away, she begins hearing the rhythmic sound of banging on the window that is right in front of her, the window of the spare room that she is in. And when Catherine heard these sounds, she felt like she had been shot with a shock of adrenaline, and she jumped up out of the bed and she ran over to the window and she immediately spread the curtains, and she found herself face to face with the exact same woman from the front porch, and she just yelled at her, "I'm calling the cops," and then she slid the curtain shut and ran out of the spare room. And for whatever reason, still Catherine didn't actually call the police. Instead, she just ran off into the living room, and then she took the stairs and she ran up into the guest bedroom, where she climbed in the bed and covered herself underneath the blankets. And there Catherine would lay for hours, and every time she would think that the woman had gone away, she would hear more banging on that window, and every now and then she would just hear another hello. But after a very long while, everything went quiet. The next morning, Catherine woke up and she didn't really know what to make of what had just happened to her. She thought for a minute that maybe it had been just a really, really vivid dream, or maybe somebody had played a prank on her. She just couldn't comprehend any rational reason why any of this would have happened to her. And after a while of clearing her head, Catherine picks up the phone and she decides she would go ahead and just call her grandmother, and she would kind of ask how the trip in Florida has been going and give her an update on how everything's going at the house. And during their conversation, Catherine kind of eases in and tells her grandmother about the strange occurrence that had kind of happened at her house that night. And to Catherine's surprise, she hears her grandmother on the phone and she starts to freak out. Her grandmother told her that a few days ago she had been in the grocery store, and as she was walking through the grocery store, she noticed that there was a strange woman who just seemed to be following her through the grocery store, staring at her. This woman apparently didn't say anything. She would just go aisle to aisle and she would just keep staring at the grandma and smiling. Catherine managed to calm down her grandmother and told her that it was probably just a coincidence, but in the back of Catherine's mind, she couldn't help but think that maybe that woman at the grocery store and the woman that had come to her grandmother's house might have been the same person. In 2017, there was a young college girl who was living alone in an apartment that she was renting out. She had just moved into this place at the beginning of the school semester, so she was still getting everything settled and getting used to the apartment. The girl in this story remains unnamed, so we will call her Jackie for our purposes. So Jackie moves into this new apartment and she's really excited. It's the beginning of a new school semester and everything just seems to be going really great for Jackie. But after a few weeks of living in this apartment, Jackie began noticing little things around the apartment that seemed to be changing without her doing anything. It was never anything major, but it would just be little things around the apartment, like a couch cushion would be moved a little bit to one side, or one of the couch pillows would be like moved to the other end of the couch, or it would be knocked off onto the floor. And sometimes she would go into the fridge and notice that things seemed to be moved around in there, or maybe the milk would be drinking down just a little bit further than she had remembered using it. So just little things like this that started to happen to Jackie started to give her this nervous feeling like maybe somebody was breaking into her apartment while she was away. She never noticed anything going missing, and there was never any changes that were big enough to where she could guarantee that definitely somebody was breaking into her apartment. There was just these little subtle things that kept on happening that were giving Jackie this nervous feeling, and she actually started getting anxiety from these feelings, and she started having these really vivid nightmares of people breaking into her apartment. And this started to happen more and more frequently, to where it seemed like almost every night she was having these nightmares of people breaking in while she was asleep. And then she would wake up and she would go around the house, and it would just look like little things were just out of place, and it kept giving her these feelings. One night, Jackie woke up in a cold sweat. She had just had a vivid, terrifying nightmare of somebody breaking into her apartment while she was asleep, and that had tried to kill her. This dream had felt so real, and it really unnerved Jackie, so she got up and she just thought she had to clear her mind. She knew she couldn't go back to bed, and she just thought she should just jump in the shower and just rinse off and clear her mind before trying to calm down and go back to sleep. So Jackie got up out of bed and she grabbed her cell phone and she walked over into the bathroom. On Jackie's shower, she had this little cell phone stand which would hold her phone in the shower and keep it out of the water, so she was able to listen to music while she was in the shower, which is something that Jackie liked to do. So Jackie set up her phone and she started playing a song, and then she put her phone on that phone stand, hopped into the shower, and began taking a shower. And for a few minutes this worked. Jackie was able to close her eyes and just focus on the water and focus on her song, and it didn't take long for those vivid thoughts of her nightmare to begin to leave her mind. And after a few minutes of this, the song that Jackie had been listening to ended, so Jackie opened her eyes and she reached for her phone so that she could skip to the next song that she wanted to listen to. But as Jackie reached for her phone, she picked up her phone, and in the reflection of the phone screen, she could see the clear silhouette of a person standing in her bathroom. Jackie's heart stopped in her chest and she didn't know what to do. There really was somebody in her apartment. She hadn't just been imagining it. Jackie knew that her one advantage in this situation was that she knew the intruder was in her house, but it didn't look like the intruder was coming into the shower. It just looked like they were standing there silently, waiting for her to climb out of the shower. And she didn't think that the intruder knew that she knew that they were in there. So even though Jackie's heart was racing beyond control, she kept her composure and she didn't freak out, and she just quietly stepped to the side so that the water wasn't pouring directly on her head, and then she turned the knobs to where the water would be scalding hot. And then Jackie waited there for a couple seconds until the water was so hot that she could barely even touch it with her fingers. And then in a swift motion, Jackie jumps out of the shower and she sprays the intruder directly in the face for a few seconds with the shower head, before dropping the shower head and running out of the bathroom past the intruder and shutting and locking the door behind her. Jackie was able to use a key to lock the intruder inside the bathroom, because this door was the particular kind of door that once you had locked the door with the key, only that key could open the door, no matter what side of the door you were on. And then Jackie wrapped herself in a towel and immediately went outside and called 911. When the police arrived, Jackie gave them the key to the bathroom and told them what had just happened with the intruder in her house. And the police went up into her apartment, and a few minutes later they came out dragging a frantic woman who was screaming and thrashing about as they drug her out of her apartment and put her in a police car. Shocked, Jackie was just standing there on the street watching as the police drag out this woman who she had never seen before out of her apartment and put her in a police car. And as Jackie's just standing there watching this, one of the police officers breaks off from the group and comes up and approaches Jackie holding an evidence bag. When Jackie looked down and saw what was in the evidence bag that the police officer was holding, she recognized that it was one of her own kitchen knives from her own kitchen. And the officer told Jackie that the woman that they had just arrested was the previous resident of the apartment before Jackie had moved in, and that she had recently been kicked out of the apartment. It would turn out that this woman had actually made copies of the keys to Jackie's apartment before she herself had been kicked out, and she had been sneaking into Jackie's apartment for weeks, sleeping on the couch, moving things around, and occasionally eating food out of the fridge, and then sneaking out of the house before Jackie woke up. And it would seem that on this particular night, while Jackie was laying there asleep having this terrifying nightmare of somebody breaking into her house, there really was this woman breaking into her house. And when Jackie got up to go get into the shower, that woman was in her living room at that very time. She just walked right past and didn't see her. And when the woman saw Jackie get up and walk into the bathroom and heard her starting to take a shower, she went into the kitchen and she grabbed one of Jackie's kitchen knives, and then she walked up into Jackie's bathroom and she stood there waiting, thinking that she had discovered a way to get her apartment back. So there you have it, guys. Thank you for watching this episode, and please let me know what you thought of these two stories. I don't know about you guys, but that second one was very unsettling to me. If you have a story suggestion, feel free to message me on either Instagram or Twitter, where my handle is just Noah's Storyvault, and I will respond to all of my direct messages. For a truly wild case, go ahead and click on this video right here. That's it for now. I'll see you guys soon, but until then, be safe out there.